And welcome everybody to the Daily Space Weather. I'm your host, Dan, aka smAsho, and my rage has been reduced to normal, comfy campfire levels once again. You're looking at the LASCO C3 coronagraph from the SOHO, and we're seeing Venus moving into the Earth-Sun conjunctive region. Next thing we're going to look at is the Sun directly. When you're doing so, make sure you use the proper instruments, such as the SDO. This is 193 angstroms, one of the UV emission spectra of ionized iron. And we see one sunspot in the northwest, a possible active region rising in the northeast, a possible sunspot rising in the southeast as we see some activity down here. Otherwise, fairly low levels of solar activity, folks, despite all those X-ray flares. We are streaming live once again to Twitch. And thanks for tuning into the smAsho stream, whether you viewed live or whether you viewed in syndication. Now we can see this active area down here. There's some filaments there around the southeastern limb, and we like to see activity kick up. We see some small Umbrae associated with that sunspot in the northeast. SpaceWeather.com is reporting 0 sunspots. We're reporting a sunspot. So I find that odd. There's the fade to the fields. It is cycle 25. Here's the fade to 304 angstroms. And we see some filaments also in the northwest, really all around the whole limb of the sun there. Lots of filamentary activity going on. Next, we're going to look at the one-day video of that sunspot. And this is the magnetic fields. And you can see any changes in those magnetic fields over the past 24 hours. Little bit of changes happening there. Next, we're going to look at the full disk view here at 171 angstroms. And we don't see anything like coronal mass ejections, Earth-facing or otherwise. Significant filament you can see up there in the northwest, right about here. This thing's been standing up for a couple of days now. And it is visible at 193 angstroms as well. Here's the composite view, including 304 and 171 angstroms at that sunspot. So that's a 24-hour video just of the sunspot. I believe it's going to be named 2764, but don't quote me on it. There's no reason to arbitrarily memorize arbitrary things. Let's look at some data. Here's the KP index. It's at 2. 10.7 centimeter radial flux at 71 solar flux units. So an increase there. As we come off of solar minimum conditions, it's time to talk about cosmology, one of my favorite subjects as it gets rewritten all over the place. And shout out to guys like Eugene Bagashov, who refused to believe lies and nonsense and continued to adapt our understanding. Uh-oh, not this again. Astronomers and cosmologists know the mass of things like the Earth, the Sun, and the galaxy. Survey said? You mean to tell me we don't even know the mass of things like the Sun and the Earth and the Milky Way? That's right, folks. We're not even aware of whether or not the Earth, the Sun, and the galaxy are gaining or losing mass. So next time an astronomer or a cosmologist tells you that we know how everything works in the universe, you may want to take that with a grain, or in this case, a truckload of salt. Let me read you a quote from a SciTech Daily article in today's issue. The noblest task of an experimental physicist is to bring down theories. Now the Bochum-based team is eagerly waiting to see whether the explanation for the discrepancy in the data will be a quite mundane one, namely a measurement error. But it's quite possible that we will trigger a revolution with our new data, concludes Hildebrand. the team expects the results to be released in late spring 2020, about the weight of the universe, or better yet, the mass of the universe, because weight is mass acted on by a gravitational force. So we won't get into the difference between weight and mass in this episode. It's some basic physics information. You want to read all about that, feel free to do a DuckDuckGo search for weight and mass. Maybe physics definition weight, physics definition mass. Anyway, what they're doing is they're attempting to use redshift to calculate masses, which isn't going to work, because redshifts and gravitational lensing are believed to be factors of gravity, and perhaps they are and perhaps they're not, but how are you going to measure the mass of an object in this sort of a cockamamie fashion when you're like, oh, the light from this galaxy, the light from this object must be distorted by this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. But if you don't know the masses of any of the objects, how are you going to calculate the distortion by gravity? We'll be interested to read the paper. Let's talk about more cosmology. The solstice. Oh yeah, the solstice. Whether it's winter in the south or summer in the north, it's only 19 days away, and we are officially in the 6 hottest weeks of the northern hemisphere and the 6 coldest weeks of the southern hemisphere. Why is that? Well, it has to do with things like ocean temperatures, jet stream flow, and the directness of the sun's rays, which get as direct as they get in the north on June 20th at 5:43 p.m. So join us for the solstice stream. Save the date. We'll be streaming at the moment of the solstice, probably something like about a half an hour before and after. And it'll be a free-for-all chat session variety show. Talk about whatever we want. Let's see where planets are located right now. And as we know, Venus is swinging past in between Earth and Sun, moving into that conjunctive region now. Here's where things are now. There's where things will be in 1 week. Were you aware that Venus has phases? Well, you can get a great view of it right now, as Venus is only visible within a close proximity to sunset and sunrise due to the fact that it is closer to the sun than the Earth. In other words, you never see it at midnight. You're only able to see it within an hour or two of sunrise or sunset. And there you can see the great phasic qualities of Venus. And this is very close to the latitude that I'm at, 40 degrees north. And that's the kind of spots you'll see it in the sky. By the way, this is from earthsky.org. Next, looking at constellations and so on. I like to know what's going on above my head. I like to use in-the-sky.org. And you'll see Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars if you're up before sunrise. Now, if you advance this, you see that Venus is rising with the sun, and you're probably not going to be able to see it for a little while yet because the sun is going to cancel it out, contrastly speaking. It's going to contrastedly make it not visible. Contrastedly, is that a term? We don't see any X-ray flares that are significant over the past 3 days. And let's talk about those M-class flares once again. The emission spectra of metals is completely different than the emission spectra and angular properties of gaseous emission spectra. Gas emits like a light bulb, and metals emit at an angle. So I would invite you to head over here to Sky Scholar once again, the YouTube channel Sky Scholar, hosted by Dr. Pierre-Marie Robitaille. Here's a clip about his video, The Solar Spectrum Explained, where he's talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. So on the very small wavelength, you've got gamma rays. The very large wavelength, you've got ultra low frequency radio emissions. In the middle, you've got visible light, the only part your eyes are able to pick up. And no, nobody's able to see carbon dioxide with the naked eye.
For electromagnetic waves, frequency times wavelength is known to equal the speed of light.
Anyway, watch the video about it, as emission spectra is sort of important if you want to be spaced out enough to watch our channel. So understand emission spectra, understand the sun, and all of cosmology, perhaps, as we watch astrophysics and indeed cosmology get rewritten. Next, looking at the GOES proton flux, and we don't see any proton events. GOES electron flux is going to be very, very low. First, let's look at the real-time solar wind. There's a real-time solar wind data. Nothing really to report on there. Solar minimum conditions have returned in terms of the solar wind density, which is down to 3.28 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed is at 386 kilometers a second. And the magnetosphere is looking fairly weak here. We're looking at the geospace magnetosphere movies in terms of magnetohydrodynamic pressure measured in nanopascals, and we see a pretty steady magnetosphere according to the model, which, by the way, is Geospace Model V1.5, which is based on the Space Weather Modeling Framework. And if you want to know what that's about, come to the Geospace Magnetosphere Movies page, click on Details, click on the Space Weather Modeling Framework, and you can read all about where the data is derived. And it's a whole bunch of different data points, folks. Next, looking at ground geospace magnetic perturbations, we don't see very many of them, and that's really no surprise, as we currently have two North Poles, one over northern Canada, another North Pole, a geomagnetic North Pole that is, over northern Siberia. We see the South Atlantic anomaly splitting, and we see two anomalies sort of forming now, one near South Africa and one near the South Atlantic anomaly, and the South Pole has crept into the southern Indian Ocean, south-southwest of Australia. GOES magnetometer is looking a little smoother here, as you see these fairly smooth waves. And for you new viewers out there, if you're wondering what the M's and N's mean, those are midnight and noon local time for the satellite. Here's some more magnetic data. It's the top view ecliptic plane field plot. The data is nearly 4 hours old today, not quite as old as it was yesterday when we covered it. And we are about to move into the North Pole-oriented current sheet, shown here in green. I'm going to give it less than 24 hours. When we make our video tomorrow on daily space weather, we should be in the North Pole-oriented current sheet. Currently in the South Pole-oriented current sheet, the part of the current sheet that's polarized by the southern solar polar field. And there you can see it's the main part of the current sheet, at least the part that Earth's on, is shown in red. Next, we see the B field being pulled around a little bit here, especially on the eastern limb. And this is the east over here, by the way. The place where space weather rises. And here's the west, where space weather sets. It has nothing to do with the orientation of a map. Although if you're in the southern hemisphere, it does match up. By the way, the Gong 2 data is derived from 51 ground-based magnetometers. It's part of the National Sunspot Observatory, and also Stereo A, which is over here, and Stereo B, which is over here, are used as they have magnetometers also, and it gives us a better idea of the full magnetic environment, at least where the Earth lies. And there's those extremely low electron flux numbers, the greater than 2 mega electron volt electron fluents remaining in these incredibly low levels, having ramped down from very, very high electron storm levels in August of 2019 down to where they are. Check out that downtrend. That is a downtrend. And the GOES electron flux showing the same fairly cratered electrons despite there being a very low solar wind density and speed. Where have all the electrons gone? Here's the total electron content forecast. And this is looking at the entire air column, all the way from the thermosphere down to the ionosphere. Not a lot of GPS errors expected. Very low levels of GPS errors, even on the equator at noontime. Here's just the ionosphere. And this is 6 hours of data, courtesy Government of Australia, Bureau of Meteorology. Let's bring up the latest image. It's looking fairly normal here. A little discharge on the daytime side. That's looking totally normal. Let's move on to the Wedge failure landslide that happened in Alaska on the 9th. Now wait. Well, all I can say is they don't really cite global warming, as Alaska heats up very quickly in the springtime due to things like the way ocean currents and the jet stream flows. So a wedge failure, which is a type of landslide that happens when multiple different layers of soil suddenly thaw, for instance, causing the massive weight on top of them to slide down. It was about a 1,100 meter slide there, and I can't even see the difference on the maps, honestly. It's there, okay. Not very exciting. So, cheers to SciTech Daily for not citing human carbon dioxide emissions for causing a wedge failure landslide in Alaska. Next, looking at the last 24 hours of earthquakes, the largest one we see, I think, happened in Iran, actually, at a 5.1 magnitude. Let's scroll up the list and see what else we happen to see. There's a deep quake at Chile, followed by only about a half an hour by another deep quake at Argentina. Those both in the 4 magnitude range. Let's keep scrolling up the list here and keep the video as dense as possible, like the brains of our viewers. Remember, folks, having a dense brain is good. Being a dense person is bad. Dense brains are associated with higher IQs. The more folds you have in your gray matter, the more likely you are to be super smart. Here's a 5.6 magnitude at nearly 100 kilometers there in the deep quake capital of the world at Tonga. Let's check and see that one, as this is a future vacation spot. Love to go to Tonga, especially American Samoa, also Fiji. Really every place out there. Talk about a desolate part of the world. Maybe not as desolate as Easter Island. Anyway, there's the location of that quake. Not felt at Tonga. Could be the largest of the past 24. Let's get back to the list here before we become old and gray. Or if we're already old and gray, then I don't know what to tell you. Here's a 3.3, 3.0 at Alaska. It's at 102.6 kilometers depth. Here's a deep quake in Japan. It's only a 4.0 magnitude at 205 kilometers depth. And let's move on to volcanoes. Klutchevskoy is still erupting. Were you aware that Klutchevskoy recently produced a stratospheric level eruption, where it produced a 40,000-foot ash plume, and it injected not only volcanic ash and dust, but also volcanic aerosols into the stratosphere, and those are able to stay up there for years, folks. I don't know if you're aware, but especially stratospheric volcanic eruptions are a global cooling input, and it's very, very cold right here in Pennsylvania. And we've got frost and hard freeze warnings in northern New England, places like Maine. Anyway, the current situation at Kamchatka on Mount Klutchevskoy is that the southeast flank remains active, and there's lava flows and strombolian eruptions and a strong thermal signal. Karimsky is also erupting. Not sure the flight level there, if there is one. Abiko erupting, flight level 9,000 there. Sakurajima, flight level 14,000 there. Ravenador, flight level 16,000 there as it explodes. And Sabankaya exploding as well, producing continuous emissions and a volcanic ash plume to 25,000 feet. Let's talk about China. It's time to take off the glasses and start talking about China. 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 Let me vanish for a minute before I talk more about China. And now let me reappear. Watch this. And I'm back, sort of. And we've moved on to the listen to some music and touch your face section. So let's play some stereotypical Chinese music. And I'm going to touch my face as therapy while I say China. It's made in China. It's the cheapest virus we've ever seen. It's made out of cheap plastic from China. China's trying to make the plastic in Hong Kong even cheaper. China. China. So please learn to say China the same way Trump says China. It's very therapeutic. And if you're viewing the content while wearing a mask, make sure you check and see if that mask was made in China. Or maybe it was made in Taiwan. That would be better than being made in China, okay? China. It's a cheap, cheesy virus. It's probably stolen intellectual capital from American, honest, good-working Americans. Probably stolen intellectual capital, stolen by China. China. Can you say it aloud? Teach your friends, teach your foes to say China aloud. Also, if you enjoy the content, please don't forget to press like and subscribe on YouTube. Obviously, this is coming from a Chinese server, because if it wasn't made in China, it would have loaded during the segment instead of after the segment's done. China. Have you ever headed to smAshomash.com/forum? We've got forums about cosmology and Earth and geophysics, and thanks for everybody posting over there. We really appreciate it. Up to 740 users. Amazing! Feel free to post whatever you like over there. We won't censor you as long as it's within the confines of the law. Let's talk about social media. Are you on Locals? It's locals.com. Be in control of your local social media by setting up an account over at Locals. Our community is smashomash.locals.com. So come over there. We've already got a blue check mark. Jumping in on the ground level on Dave Rubin's new site, focusing on things like free speech. We're also on Facebook, where they focus on things like censorship and nonsense. And we have a page over there called Entropy Busters, and there's a good reason for it. It's because there's a lot of entropy on the internet, so help us bust it by joining that group if we invite you. We're also on Gab. I don't know if you're aware, but Trump is now on Gab, as there's been some issues with things like censorship, propaganda, nonsense, and pure lies on places like big tech-run companies like Twitter, Google, and Facebook. Oh yes, Twitter, Google, and Facebook. The big tech companies that don't realize that they can't break the internet, but the internet can break them. We are also on Twitter, believe it or not. And yes, we've retweeted one of Tony Heller's posts. Check it out. These people must be white supremacists. Wow, those people must be white supremacists, folks. Did you know? Twitter.com/smAshomash. Check this out. Trump would issue final death blow to Twitter by deleting his account, says a right-wing activist. Oh no! Laura Loomer. Is she even right-wing? I don't even know. Laura Loomer claims that Trump would destroy Twitter. I just don't really care. But guess what? All of Trump's tweets are on Gab. And the page isn't loading. Anyway, it's at RealDonaldTrump. It's gab.com/RealDonaldTrump. If you want to follow him over there and stay the hell off of the horrendously ridiculous, nonsensical Twitter platform. Now, I don't know if you're aware, I started skateboarding in 1983. And probably not as good as Frankie Hill, but check out this ollie at the end of this video. This is the most insane ollie. This is like part of the reason why he needed knee surgery. Check this thing out. Truly epic. Anyway, if you don't follow me on Instagram, you may not see quality posts like that, or like this lovely rhododendron photograph. It's Instagram.com/smAshomash. Oh, and another thing. Mayor Jim Kenney can suck a golf ball through a garden hose. I wouldn't set foot in his sanctuary city until he's gone, because Jim Kenney's made Philadelphia a sanctuary for everybody besides law-abiding taxpayers. If you haven't checked out Joe Biden's YouTube page, oh my goodness. Check out the Biden brunch from last night. It is hilarious. And it has a 100-72 thumbs up versus thumbs down ratio. It had 200 thumbs ups and 143 thumbs downs when we viewed it. So I did the math to tell you what the ratio was. No malarkey, Joe. Now, last night, as promised, we did watch Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, the 1964 American psychological thriller, and it is fantastic. It is not dated at all. It was much better than we thought. The performances by Bette Davis, Olivia de Havilland, everybody, Agnes Moorehead, fantastic. Highly recommended the 1964 psychological thriller Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. We paid $4 to rent it on Amazon. Get ready for merch. It's going to look like this. That's what the 3C405 shirt's going to look like, although I do believe we're going to mount this on a starry background. So we're going to actually put the Cygnus constellation stars in there as well, underimposed underneath the radio image. That's Cygnus A, massive radio galaxy 3C405, the second strongest radio source in the entire sky, despite being 530 million light years away. Second only to, wait for it, have a guess. What's the strongest radio source, folks? I'll display this map while you think about it. The strongest radio source is the sun. Probably not very surprised. And look at the frost and hard freeze warnings up in Maine, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. I mean, Vermont. Hydrologic forecasts are still looking pretty harsh here in the northern Rockies. Hopefully not too much flooding going on there. And it looks like some flooding happening here along the Mississippi once again, and in some hazardous seas warnings there on the East Coast. Let's look at some more weather stuff. Here is windy.com's pressure maps. We'll let this advance about 24 hours into the GFS forecast. And we'll hit pause at around noontime tomorrow. And let me move my face lotion. And there's where we think things will be at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Thanks for staying tuned for the value-added services as we look at the jet streams. And if you're wondering where I'm located, it's in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. Here are the jet streams of the eastern world. We've got doubled up and tripled up jet streams in both the northern and southern hemispheres. Here are the jet streams of the eastern world. Extreme meridional jet stream flow characterizing the area off the east coast of the U.S., for instance. We've got very cold air being injected down into the Caribbean. We've got very cold air being injected onto the top of my head. And this extreme meridional jet stream flow here, this looks just like the diagram if you look up meridional jet stream flow. See, normally we have zonal flow, where the jet stream goes like this, not where it makes 180-degree bends for years at a time. And if you're blaming your extreme weather on hotter temperatures and carbon dioxide, take a physics class, for goodness sakes. Next, we're looking at the water vapor maps for Africa and Europe. Water vapor maps for the Far East and Oceania. Today on 6/1, June 1st, where we are less than 3 weeks from summer, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, the winter solstice. Here is the, oh, I forgot about this one. We see some green ghosts above this incredible display of sprites. Not sure where this one's located, but you can find it at spaceweather.com if you want to view it yourself. Incredible sprites here. They're going to slow it down to show you the green ghosts coming up here. Check it out, that green glow there associated with those giant set of sprites. What a fantastic video. Here it is one more time. Yowzers. Well done, whoever captured that. Let's give a credit. It's from Thomas Ashcraft. Nicely done, Mr. Ashcraft. And we apologize if we've misgendered you. Next, looking at lightningmaps.org to show you some significant lightning here in the Middle East. Hey, Izmir. There's thunder rolling in. Izmir. I have no idea where that is. No lightning striking the continental U.S., it looks like. And let's move on. Here's a U.S. Doppler radar map. And things are pretty calm in the U.S. right now. Here is the shortwave satellite animation, looking at where clouds are likely to be while it's too dark to see them with the visible. And here's the water vapor map of the same region. Let's blow that up and look at North Dakota, as there's a heck of a convergence happening up there. And massive pressure gradients are often the subject of closer looks here at the daily space weather. And if you're flying east to west or west to east across those areas, expect some turbulence. By the way, thanks to our patrons for being associate and assistant producers to the channel. It's the main source of funding. So again, thanks patrons, thanks subscribe stars, thanks everybody who's ever placed a one-time donation. Things like PayPal, all the links are below the video. Please support the channel via our social media, sharing the content, leaving comments, etc. We greatly appreciate all of the interaction with the Smash team. Thanks everybody from all around the world for viewing the videos, sharing the videos, and promoting the channel in whatever way you are willing and able to do. Next, looking at the colorized magnetograms. And let's look at a close-up here of the sunspot. We'll see if it still is a sunspot, and there's a little bit of magnetic mixing happening right there. So the activity could be ramping up. Let's see what the intensity gram shows us. And there's the most recent intensity gram, and you can clearly see a significant umbra right there. So that is a sunspot. If it's not named yet, it will be today, most assuredly. And let's close things out here by looking at the 94 angstroms view. In fact, let's look at the zoomed in view. There's a little bit more zoom for you of both the north solar polar region as well as the sunspot. And I think it's 2764, don't quote me on it. And do we have any comments? No, we don't. It's about time to vanish. And it's about time to close this thing out. So thanks for tuning in, folks. Again, please share on your social media. Tell your friends and foes and your neutrals to subscribe. As there is no enmity and grudges are not held, because holding a grudge is like ingesting poison and expecting the other person to die. So remember, folks, stare at the sun. Don't drink, and if you do, don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, may that solar wind be at your back and that covidiously absent from your universe.